Starting off with a doozy today. I haven't watched anything about it, but my Discord requested the story, and it is being very talked about right now on the internet. My TikToks are being flooded with this girl's story. Apparently, it's a documentary that's going around, and I haven't seen it, but I'm very tempted to watch it. I think it'd be kind of fun to watch it. Maybe we can watch it in the Discord. I don't know what the rules are. Like, I don't know where it is. I don't know if it's in... I don't know where it is. Maybe it's a YouTube documentary. I don't know anything about it, but we'll try to figure that out. Let's go ahead and give it a go. 100 bodies in a night. Let's see what it's about.
What happens when you sleep with 100 men in a single day? That is likely not a question you have ever asked yourself, but it is one that's driving a lot of online discourse after OnlyFans star Phillips did just that, with now more and more people finding out about it because Josh Peters shared a documentary about it. Also,
oh wait, Josh Peters, let's look at that again.
Did just that, with now more and more people finding out about it because Josh Peters shared it.
Okay, Josh Peters, so it is a subscribe. Oh, we should watch the documentary. Watch the uncensored version here. So there's a YouTube version and an uncensored version. And I just want to keep something in mind. OF, just because you're like, they can make you manufacture yourself into a star. Because I did look up this girl's social media presence and she doesn't have a lot of followers. So once again, things like this make girls like this go viral. And that's how they make a majority of their money, which is like, it's why women appear on Fresh and Fit. Because going on Fresh and Fit brings in the money because these men are so mad at these women for being OF content creators and out of their anger, subscribe to their OF. Humans are so strange as a species, but here we are. So a lot of the sensationalism is how these people end up becoming rich. So even the women who are saying, oh, I make $4 million a month on OF, they could be, or they're saying they are. So people subscribe to their OF to see what the hype is about. So just keep that in mind.
A documentary about it. Also, I will say there is a lot that people are talking about here. So where we're going to start is with showing some of the documentary for context. Because it starts with Lily talking about starting her OnlyFans career, saying that it's something that she loves to do and seemingly being excited to take on this 100 guy challenge.
I've just always had quite like a sexual nature. As soon as I started on the platform, I kind of realized,
I will be honest, unless people are like educated in sexual liberty, sexual feminist politics, positivity, I don't believe them. And the reason I don't believe them is because in order to actually understand your power within sex, you have to deconstruct your lack of power within the patriarchy. And so I do not trust these women who say like, oh, I've just been really sexual. I just really love doing it. I think they're often very depressed, very upset with having to do it. I don't think they enjoy it. And I don't believe them because unless they've had time to deconstruct the patriarchy in relation to their drive, I don't think they're doing it for themselves. I think they're doing it for money. And I think that's why some of the backlash in regards to the documentary is because a lot of people felt like she looked dead inside after the documentary progressed. And I wouldn't be surprised because a lot of people in sex industries are very unhappy because they haven't deconstructed. They've simply out of rebellion joined or out of desperation or out of survival, which is different. You can be desperate and be a sex worker and not be a survival sex worker. Then there's survival sex work, which is different. Okay, survival sex workers are a completely different category than people that are desperate for a job, people who like doing it for a living, and people who do it as a means of political protest. These are completely different categories, right?
Yes, how much money you can make and also just how much I loved it. I think other people in the industry definitely look down on me for doing this, but I think at the end of the day, people forget that it's also my fantasy. And this is also something that I'm really enjoying and want to do and have wanted to do before I was even in the industry.
Phillips saying she's not in this industry because she had no other choice and that she feels empowered making money off the idea that guys sexualize her because she feels men sexualize her no matter what. And it shows her setup, how comfortable she is being filmed, doing sexual acts. But even though she said many times that she likes her OnlyFans career in general and is looking forward to sleeping with 100 guys, Josh kind of questioned some of it and had a lot of concerns. Right? Like when the applications opened for men to apply to sleep with her, it was like floodgates opening. People from all over the world started flying in to do this. But it also seemed like there would be no criminal record check on these guys. And while Lily said they were prioritizing men who had STI checks, it seemed like they weren't going to go to any lengths to verify this or know for sure that all the men were STI free. With there also being a moment where she seemed unsure of some of the risks.
So you would let like these guys do that on your face?
Yeah.
And in your mouth?
Yeah.
What if they had HIV?
Is that where it comes from? With spunk in the mouth?
It can.
Also with that, just to get educational for a second, the risk to catch HIV is much lower orally than other kinds of intercourse, but it is still possible. But the main
spaghettios. This is what I mean to say. I do not trust people in this industry that haven't deconstructed, educated, and read up on the true risks of any industry they're in. It's why I don't trust anybody who's just in a job to have a job. Like, do you actually like this industry you're in? Have you, educated yourself on it? Have you really looked into it? I'll give you an example related to content creation. There are multiple types of content creators. Content creators that pay for bots and views are not content creators. They're just in it for the money. They're not authentic creators. They're untrustworthy business people, right? If you're somebody who pays $5, $4, $6, $10,000 for a company to push out your content in a way that's fake or manufactured, or that you're not a YouTuber, you're not a content creator, you're just another person trying to make some money. And same thing with the sex industry. You're not a person who's empowered. You're a person who's just trying to get a quick, payout, regardless of the risks. It's like every person can be in the same industry, but the way you handle it or you have a relationship with it, it's totally different, So again, I don't think she's a monster. I think she's the typical uneducated person who thinks they're going to make money. And let's be real, all of the responsibility is falling on her because she's the face of it. But tons of men are spreading STIs right now because they also aren't getting tested. Like, these men are also not getting tested with her, or they're not prioritizing their own safety because are they demanding she gets tested? So this isn't just her. She's a symptom of exactly what came before her, which is an uneducated populace, a myth of the quick dollar with sex work, and of course, the myth of having sex with 100 men in a night is empowering. It's not empowering if you're doing it because they objectify you anyways. Having sex with men that are going to objectify you is not empowering. It's just like self-harm.
Main thing we're hitting on here, and the point still stood, that Josh was afraid that she was unprepared for what she was getting into and who these 100 men could be.
There's a decent chance that one of them is going to be dangerous. One of them might have a weapon, have a criminal record. A few of them will have STIs. Just on a basic statistic, you can know that a few of them are going to have STIs.
Now, I will say this, though, and I think this is important. I'm not sure what this man's intention is in terms of wanting to, quote, protect her, because every industry has its pros and cons. Every industry has its negatives in terms of harm. So if you're going to give her this advice, I hope you give the same advice to men who want to be in the military or men who want to be construction workers. And that's the difference, is like, I'm very consistent with warning people against their industry, no matter what it is. You want to be a YouTuber? Let me tell you all the negatives. You want to be the president of the United States? Let me tell you all the negatives. You want to do a teaching job? Let me tell you all the negatives. Because the stigma against adult workers is that there's more negatives, and I just do not agree. I do not agree. I think every job has its, pros and cons, depending on what you think is going to impact you. And they don't usually have that same energy. Does he go around making documentaries about 17-year-old boys convinced to go to the military the moment they turn 18 and shows concern for them? Or is it just more interesting to do it on women because everyone collectively is anti-female?
Also in this doc, it seemed like she was putting a lot of pressure on herself, saying the thing she was most nervous about was that all 100 guys might not enjoy it, and she wanted all 100 to view it positively. But then, by the time the day came, things went wrong. They were running late right off the bat. She was unable to take as many breaks as she intended to, and the day ran way longer than she anticipated. Which, for some context on the time, each guy was given 5 minutes, but many went over, and so that alone puts you at well over 8 hours. Plus, she had to take breaks to shower. It also seems like not all the guys followed the rules. Right? Some went past their time slot, and she alluded to feeling pressured into letting them. She also told the men that they couldn't finish on her eyes, but some did anyway, even if it may have been accidental, which caused pain in her eyes. But really, the most viral part of this whole documentary and situation was the aftermath, where she discussed how intense all of it felt.
It's not for the weak, girls, if I'm honest. It was hard. I don't know if I'd recommend it. I don't know how to explain it,
It's not like just having sex with someone.
Yeah. Just one in, one out, like it feels intense.
Again, this brings me back to people who move through their trauma. I think we might go over it. I don't want any drama with any other content creators, but that girl Ayla, who I've, no offense, always had weird feelings about, mostly because she pretends like she's not traumatized from her childhood molestation with her father, allegedly. And I think that's frustrating to hear, because there's no way she hasn't been traumatized, given the way she talks about her sex life. And this girl wrote a document, or a little document about how she, for her birthday, had like a birthday orgy. And in the document talked about how she instinctually started to fight the men off and people had to pin her down. So she continued having sex with them. And I'm just sitting here like, what part of this is sex positive? What part of this story is healthy? What part of this story is what we want for girls or people in general? And I don't like it. And the issue is like these women get platformed. The Aylas and this woman are the ones who are getting platformed because they are up, because it is negative, because it's unhealthy, because it is exactly proving the point that everyone has that work is bad. And that's the problem. They're not interviewing healthy people like me. They're not like interviewing the Genevieves. They're not interviewing people who have a well-adjusted relationship with these industries. They're interviewing people who are weird. They're interviewing people who are unhealthy because that brings in the clickbait. Not very interesting to talk to an adult worker that is healthy and adjusted. So they talk to these women, and I've seen them time and time again. Lex Friedman talked to Ayla, Trigonometry talked to Ayla, and I'm sitting here like, why are you interviewing this woman? And it's because she sensationalizes her life, right? And I get it, like she's neurodivergent, I feel you, blah, blah, blah. But reading her own telling of her own story is very frustrating. And so for her to kind of like be interviewed is exactly, I think, the problem with these industries. And the same thing with this girl here. He's not interviewing her because he cares about her. He's interviewing her because she's exactly the reason why people warn women against the industry when understanding that this isn't even the industry standard. This is a very specific sensationalized shoot in which she is going beyond her physical and mental capacity to go viral. This isn't a normal day for an adult worker. 100 bodies in a day isn't normal. So of course it's going to be unhealthy.
Like more intense than you thought it might.
Definitely.
She needs to talk to a therapist. A medical professional should come here and she needs to talk about it. Like she needs to talk to a professional.
Okay. Okay. Just take
1 minute. The awkward interaction of like you feeling pressure to have to make them if like you haven't spent enough time with them and feeling like they didn't, like you didn't give them a good time. Sometimes you'd like disassociate and be like, you know, like it's not like normal things at all.
And with all that, she may not have actually been the only one shaken up by the experience. The documentary even showing one of the guys barely able to hold and sip from a water bottle after sleeping with her. But this also as her team
because this isn't like, I just want to give you an example. In the BDSM communities I was a part of, in the sex positive communities I was a part of, this is why we had negotiations. This is why we did contracts. Sex with vanillas is different. BDSM with vanillas is different. Vanilla people pretend to do BDSM all the time, right? But if you go to a BDSM community, it's different. And same, if I'm interacting with a vanilla, I don't really do the contracts or BDSM rules. But if I'm interacting with BDSMers, I do the rules because it's a different cultural expectation, right? And not that I've been with a vanilla in a lot of years, but you know what I'm saying? Like the idea is that I operate differently because the rules are different. In BDSM communities, testing is done. Paperwork is exchanged. There's a negotiation. There's even a waiting period sometimes. Some people usually wait. They go, let's negotiate this day. We'll wait 3 days to make sure we're still in the mood in 3 days. It depends. You don't have to do it that way. You don't have to do anything anyway. It's a construct, right? But in the communities I was a part of, there was a great length to avoid any bad situations, and they still happened. Bad things still happen to people. And so you have to understand in a community where they're not even doing those checks, of course the bad things are going to be amplified. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for education, but you have to have educated participants. And that's the dilemma. Like, you know, my heart goes out to this girl, and she's exactly the reason why we need to educate people. But once you're educated, you then have to make a decision if you're going to make money by sensationalizing your life. You know, I do not sensationalize my life. I've never been able to. It always felt very bad and icky because I don't want to be the girl that's like, ooh, Brittany does crazy stuff. Because like nobody, one, respects you. And two, it's not true. That honestly, BDSM feels like a very normal pastime if you're doing it when you're in it. But this never happened. I've never seen a BDSM event or an orgy event where someone took 100 bodies. It's not normal. It's a very extreme event, even for these sex positive communities. It's not what's happening.
Seemed pretty supportive in the aftermath, saying she took it like a champ. However, online, the responses are a lot more complicated, right? Some just hating Lily for doing this at all, saying that she makes them ashamed to be a woman. Others saying they have no sympathy for her, saying she's disgusting. But then you had others feeling sorry for her, thinking that she's dealing with more than she's letting on, that she's unwell or unhappy, saying things like, she didn't think this through at all. This has to be some sort of self-harm. And no sane, right-minded woman would have done done what she did and you guys aren't concerned for her at all? For her mental health, her well-being? Others also using this as a wider condemnation of OnlyFans and the porn industry as a whole, saying that watching and creating this kind of content is actively harming people and adding, hating on Lily Phillips is like hating symptoms of a virus but not hating the virus itself. The sex industry is abusive and manipulative, and what is dressed up as empowerment is actually subjugation and disempowerment, as well as this actress is just one of the many victims of this industry, even if she willingly participated. Right, with there being this argument that the industry has just gone too far now. And on that note, in the doc, you had Josh speaking to a different OnlyFans creator who noted that people do keep pushing the envelope further and further, even if it's to their own detriment.
People are starting to do the most outrageous things online. It just keeps being like leveled up and up and up of the expectations.
And with all this, you also had people out there saying that even though this was Lily's decision, she was still sexually assaulted by these men because some violated rules and boundaries, which also resulted in a number of people.
There's a high probability that she did feel eventually like assaulted, because if there were rule breaks or not, like, did they have safe words? Was there a third party keeping watch? There's so many things that go into this.
Really mad at her team for having her go through all this with such little protection. And this also is then others out there were more disgusted with the men who slept with Lily than Lily herself, with those in this group arguing that it's the men like them that create larger problems, arguing it's funny how men are quick to shame women in the sex industry but refuse to acknowledge their role in keeping it alive, and saying this documentary about Lily Phillips is a perfect example. But then also you had others saying this whole situation really isn't that big of a deal as it's being made out to be, and that this is one woman who made a choice, even if that choice is very questionable. With some saying things like, why is the internet making it seem like this is just some gal who got in over her head on OnlyFans? She is a porn star who makes porn. Everyone made the crying at the end sound intense, but it really is that she's tired and upset that it didn't go as smoothly as she wanted versus the devastating toll this has on her. And then also some just kind of in the middle saying Lily Phillips is a grown woman who is aware of the consequences of it all and consented for it. She's most certainly not a victim, but I can't help but feel bad. Physically and mentally, she surely can't be okay.
A victim is such an interesting topic. Like, what makes a victim? Sometimes you don't know what you're signing up for until you do it. So the idea that like she knew what she was signing up for, sort of an oxymoron. I've met so many men who joined the military, so many people, friends of friends of friends, who have said they always thought they knew what they were signing up for until they got there. And that's the point. That's why hindsight is 20/20, guys.
And so with all that, of course, I want to pass the question off to you here. Where do you stand on this? Right? We've talked about a lot of people in different camps, different takes. So let me know what you're thinking in those comments. Though I will say, no matter your opinion, it appears that Lily is moving forward. And I mean with this specific content, because she actually announced that next year, she's gonna be trying to sleep with 1,000 men in a day in an attempt to break a world record. So this discourse, this debate, likely not going anywhere. Well, you may.
I'm not happy with that conclusion. And I do think, and I hope she changes her mind, but I do think that this is a trauma response. Like, if she went to therapy and meditated and got better, she wouldn't do this. This is not my hope for the world when I say I'm positive. This is not my hope for the world when I say I want better things for women and for femme people and for sex workers in general, regardless of gender. Like, this is not my hope for the world when I say I want a more inclusive community. I want people to be so well adjusted, they don't have to put themselves in situations where they're after the fact saying, I don't know that I would recommend this for people, because like, that's not what I want, right? Not that I think you should do only things that you recommend to people, but I do think that this is not good, right? Now, we might watch the documentary. Maybe that's something we should do. I think one of the things I want to talk about is, I've never really talked about the Ayla girl, because I think like she's connected to like that sphere that's really toxic. And I think she herself holds a lot of toxicity, and she makes me really uncomfortable as a content creator. If I'm being honest, like, I find her to be questionable in a lot of ways, but I think that comes from the data that I've seen from her. And I don't feel comfortable with her as a person necessarily, but she did something, she does something similar where like she sort of, in my opinion, is very traumatized, but acts like she isn't, and then isn't aware enough or self-aware enough to like take care of herself. So then she gets kind of picked by the boys as a girl who is like one of those girls that's like cool and doesn't get traumatized. If you recall, during the assault conversation with Destiny, I called in and I said, like, your language is like victim blaming. And then she called in and she was just like, yeah, I've never been impacted by trauma, even though my dad molested me. It's like a very weird narrative to hear from grownups who are acting like that's a reality for them. And it is possible. I talked to Dr. Kirkanda about this, where you could technically be a person who comes out, but Dr. Kirkanda always says everybody needs 5 to 10 years of therapy anyway. So the narrative being that you're not impacted by your circumstances, I think is like really messed up, but that's that bubble. So you'll see here on her Twitter, for my birthday, this is March 1st, she said, for my birthday, my partner and I had some friends organize a huge gangbang with me and 42 attendees. Here's the breakdown of how the event was organized, exit surveys, and statistics. So Ayla, if you don't know, is just like a Twitter pollster. So she goes and takes polls on her Twitter for her members, and she's an adult worker. And I think she's on the spectrum, if I'm not mistaken. And so she is like a very like sort of that kind of girl, right? But I think the problem with this girl and these people is that they're not sex positive and they're not educated, but they get boosted by centrists and right-leaning people as like the sort of like the educated ones, but they're not. Like if you watch AMP and you watch Mr. Christopher, like different bubbles. Ayla might be a worker and Ayla might be on the spectrum and Ayla might be all of these things, but she is not one of us because she hangs out with those people. Because she is not progressive. She is not positive. She is different. Like she's not in the same group of people, right? And so if you go, she has her gangbang story here, which is on her website. It's on her Substack. I'll link it so you guys can check it out. But there were things in this thing I didn't like. Like if you Google the word held, she has this section here that says the way it worked was a few men volunteers held me down on a bed and a line of guys approached. And once a guy was sufficiently hard, he'd come and bang me. Summoned by organizers yelling, anybody got a hard, line yourselves up by hardness. They had to jack themselves off furiously and then got 3 minutes to attempt to come while banging me. While I was closely surrounded by other men who were preventing me from biting or kicking anyone for kink reasons, I asked them to hold me down. They also had to switch condoms between other fluffers and me. That was an extreme hard mode or soft mode. This was extreme hard mode or soft mode. And I'm honestly surprised as many men got hard as they did. My own partner, for example, despite being excellent at sex and the primary organizer for this event and other sex events, usually needs to be alone with a lady in order to get hard. I don't like it. I don't like it. And I think it's weird. And I did not enjoy reading this. I was not excited about this. And the reason I didn't originally cover it is, one, I knew I would be accused of just disliking Ayla because she had a different opinion of me on Destiny's comments. But I do think he is a rape apologist. And I do think his language victimizes more people of assault. And I do think her language does as well. I am not comfortable the way that she organized this orgy, though I do think a lot of it was very thoughtful and safety concerns were definitely taken into consideration. So I want to give them credit for that. There was condoms and testing and there was a lot that went into it to make it safe, but I felt like her description of her experience was for me just a very trauma response, big trauma response. So whether you're the girls on OF or you're Ayla or you're somebody else, unless you have deconstructed, you are only moving out of reaction to trauma, the patriarchy, and men's objectification of you. Unless you have deconstructed your desire to be objectified at this level, then I do not believe it is not coming from a trauma response. My opinion. Okay. So if you guys want to read that, you can. I'm not gonna highlight it here, but I'm happy to link it because Ayla is in her own little bubble and does her own little thing. I just wish she understood that deconstruction, I think, is needed here. But we all live our own lives, okay? Chat says she contextualized her trauma, which is not the same as healing, but it can feel like it is. I didn't understand that until I engaged in behavior that further traumatized me and I had to unpack it. For sure. Yep. There is this narrative that occurs in people, and I understand as somebody who denied my own trauma for many, many, many years, there is this idea you get fed in certain bubbles that you don't want to be somebody that's impacted by your trauma except to make you stronger. But if you do not deconstruct your trauma, it will catch up with you and it will show up and it will haunt you in different ways. And so the dilemma is like, you can live your whole life like that. How many of our grandpas and grandmas died traumatized? But you don't have to live that way either. And you have to be careful because your trauma might be the reason you hold opinions that are going to hurt other marginalized communities because you haven't faced your trauma. Trauma can be a great motivator to change the world. It can also be a great motivator to allow the status quo to continue so you can be seen as one of the good ones. And that's the problem. Chad says, do you believe trauma can be passed down genetically with epigenetics? I do believe in that. Yeah, I do. From all the data I've read, then yes. And if so, how do we heal that? The same way you heal any trauma. You do the work. Just because it's genetic doesn't mean you can't deconstruct it. Just because it's genetic doesn't mean you can't overcome it. Just because it's genetic doesn't mean you can't break a generational curse. Yes, I do think trauma can be passed down genetically, but so is everything else. Everything about us is genetic. We do not escape our genetics. We do not escape our biological experience. Like, we're having a biological experience. So everything we are is biology. Everything we are is nature. Everything we are is genetics. And so we start one issue at a time to deconstruct it and figure out why it's happening. And then we work on healing those patches in us, right? Just as tangentially related, how do you know if something's traumatic or not? My basic idea of trauma is a behavior formed under an adverse context, created to tolerate that context. I guess you can tell once you're away from the environment situation, perhaps. I think trauma is, I said it really well like a few months ago. How would I explain trauma versus just a circumstance that went badly? Trauma is longer than normal lasting effects after enough friction. So friction occurs in all of life, but it's not usually long lasting. It usually just might upset you for the day. Like if you have road rage and someone gets you upset, usually just upset for a couple hours, maybe a couple minutes, maybe a couple seconds. That's not trauma. That's just like friction. Trauma is when the friction is long lasting and impactful. So you had road rage, you got so afraid, you actually carried it into every other time you ever got into the car. You ended up being afraid of every single time you got into the car after that. That's something that I would say was traumatic and you need to deconstruct. So you're not afraid every time you get into a car. That's how I think about the difference, because we will have everyday moments in life where we're impacted and feeling away and strongly in our feelings. But, you know, is it trauma just because you had a bad moment? No. But trauma is something that impacts you long term and stays with you and starts to become a part of your normal. I think the best way for me to recognize a negative change in myself is like, oh, is this becoming a part of my routine? Have I held on to this bad energy for more than like a day? Uh-oh, like I have to pay attention to that. Is it moving into my week? Oh my gosh, has it been with me for a month? Maybe it's not trauma. Maybe it's bad energy. Maybe it's like a bad mood you haven't deconstructed. But either way, at that point, we need to deconstruct and find out what it is. And then we can do it a lot on our own, right? A lot of the work you can do on your own. But if you come to the point where you've done all you can, then we talk to a professional. And a professional is just another tool to help us get a little further. And that's the cool part about like a proper therapist or somebody who specializes in your specific needs, is like they can help you, give you that extra tool.
Stuck in my head, in real life I'm in bed, my belly's being fed and I'm okay. I'm just fine, yet all I do is whine, not to you in my mind, cause I know I don't make sense. I've been nothing but blessed, so why's my life a mess? Please tell me, cause I'm sick of thinking. Yeah, I'm sick of reaching out for the truth and living life as a fool.